And so the President of the United States continues to double down on the fact that he believes the election was rigged. And he continues to put out the delusional thought that he won by a landslide election. And let's raise the question right now. What do you think, America? Do you think the president is right? Do you think it was right that his supporters stormed the United States Capitol and then, after being caught in the act and causing so much destruction, pointed fingers at other fringe elements like Antifa and comparing it to Black Lives Matter? The bottom line is they were there, the pictures show it, arrests are being made, and now a cascading event of things will take place on Capitol Hill, like an impeachment. Joining me now is a wonderful group of political astute people who care about this country. I call them patriots. Dr. Avis Jones DeWeaver, political commentator and author of The Exceptional Black Woman. And then we have the West Coast Connection attorneys, Mark Harris, who is, of course, a civil rights attorney, a partner to the Ben Crump law firm, and Timothy Allen Simon, an attorney who worked with Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger and has TAS strategies. And he's also the chairman of the board of directors for the California African American Chamber of Commerce. They bring a lot of information to us and a lot of understanding of what's happening in America. I got to ask you right at the top, what are your concerns for this country based on the events that we're still reeling from with this attack that took place on the United States Capitol? Dr. Avis?
Well, my biggest concern is that I don't believe this is the end of violence. I mean, this is, the reality is that this also wasn't the beginning of the violence. We've seen white mob violence like this since the very beginning of this nation. And I believe that this particular episode was spawned by a reflexive reaction to a loss that was due to the voting power of Black people. So my concern is that no matter what happens in terms of impeachment, which I do believe needs to happen, I also believe that not only are there potential threats, there are threats that are related to the inauguration, but I believe well past this particular moment relating to the transfer of power, that Black people specifically will be under the microscope in an even more intense way by these groups of violent terrorists, specifically as a way to intimidate us with regards to flexing our voting power in the future.
I agree with Dr. Avis on this point completely. America gets a cold, Black folks get pneumonia. I'm very concerned about that, and I'm very concerned about what you just mentioned. When you work with Ben Crump, the #1 civil rights attorney in the country, all kinds of things happen. This isn't new for me, unfortunately. I've had my home vandalized, I've had my car vandalized, I've had threats. I'm afraid to open up the mail that comes into my law office because of the fact that I think there could be some effort to use that mail in an inappropriate way. So this is unfortunately not new for us, including Dr. Avis and Timothy, who've been on the forefront of seeking justice for our people. Having said that, I'm most concerned that the Constitution will be so contorted and twisted. The Constitution, which has stood in place in this country since 1788, in an attempt to try to drive this guy out of office, which in 9 days or so, he'll be out. I don't want to see the Constitution contorted in a manner that's inconsistent with what its intent is relative to the removal of the President of the United States.
That Constitution never foresaw a Mitch McConnell who can control the country from the legislative branch. The fact, as I believe Dr. DeWeaver brought up in our last discussion, that this president and his agents are not handcuffed right now, or at least under house arrest, is a clear establishment of the facts that our Constitution is an evolving document that requires Congress and the voters to reassess, including the statehood of certain territories and the district that I've discussed in the past. So I do believe we could go through with impeachment. I also believe there should be prosecution on sedition and terrorism. I believe that the culprit should be hunted down. I remember John McCain talking about hunting down the terrorists to the gates of hell. Okay, I think the same attitude should be taken by this country when their own citizens, those who scream patriotism, those who cry out USA, 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 turn on this government based purely on the fact that our vote resulted in the election of Joe Robinette Biden and Kamala Harris.
We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back to the program. We're talking about what unfolded since last Wednesday. It's important to talk about it today because it's not over. That we have not hit bottom yet, as Timothy Allen Simon has asserted before. So joining me is Dr. Avis Jones-Weaver, Timothy Allen Simon, and Mark Harris. Dr. Avis, I want to ask you, big tech, does it play a role in what happened, and how do we deal with that? Because the president will talk about the fact that he no longer has big tech to use to get his message out. Fringe groups out there are still using various services along the internet to applaud what took place last Wednesday. What do we need to do about that?
Yeah, big tech is part of the problem, but it's not the totality of the problem. And also big tech, I think, needs to be disaggregated a little bit. I believe that though Trump's favorite platform clearly was Twitter, and that was the megaphone that he's used ever since he first ran, I believe the particular arm that's been most dangerous around everything that's been happening outside of those right-wing places like Parler is a Facebook, for example. That was used really expertly during the first election that he ran in to help to spread disinformation and misinformation in terms of Russian interference. Then with this particular election, we saw Facebook right at the very beginning, in essence, said boldly and proudly that they weren't going to fact check at all, that they were going to let lies stand knowingly under this supposed banner of free speech. And now let's see where it's gotten us. What has happened is that there is an entire right-wing ecosystem that is a propaganda arm of the most radical right-wing fringe in this nation. And yes, big tech is part of that. Social media engines are a part of that, but that's not the totality of it. It also includes a huge ecosystem of radio shows and big personalities like a Rush Limbaugh and people like that. It includes digital shows, which have gotten very, very popular, like the crazy Alex Joneses of the world. It also includes certain television entities, like a Fox News, like a Newsmax, like an OANN. These types of arms have all been spreading lies, misinformation. They have been a propaganda state engine for this particular president.
Mark, you're a constitutional scholar and lawyer. Look, when I hear Dr. Avis talk about this, I also hear that many people are saying free speech is only good for those who believe that they are, in the right, and will point fingers at those who are exercising their free speech along colored lines and say, well, look at Black Lives Matter. They're not, they're this, they're that. They point fingers. We have a lot of finger pointing going on in this country, and no one rising up to accept responsibility, including the social media platforms and big tech. From a constitutional standpoint, where do we stand?
On the role of tech, their position has been that it's not the message, it's not our message, we're the messenger. Don't shoot the messenger. I agree with them. I completely agree with them. The fact that somebody's sitting in their home and they're spooning this madness into their mouth, whether it be liberal madness or conservative madness or racist madness or whatever, that's their problem. It's not big tech's problem. Big tech, in terms of the social media outlets, are not the originators of the message. They're the messenger, and I believe they should continue in the manner they have up to this point. Leave it to us to discern our own truth from falsehoods, American to American.
Sometimes you can't always leave it up to people to make the right decision. So we find ourselves in a quagmire of ideas and ideologies pitted against each other. And the question is, how do we find that fine line to protect everyone's constitutional free speech and at the same time bring some accountability and responsibility to the person putting out those kinds of messages?
Well, President Barack Obama, former President Barack Obama, was the first presidential candidate to effectively utilize social media and putting forth his message of hope, his message of bringing the country together. He also said in a debate with former Senator John McCain that it is often better to use a scalpel versus an axe. And I do think that we should all be concerned about the chilling effects of regulating speech. And as we say in government or politics, whose ox is getting gored?
Mm.
It is no surprise to me that we have white nationalists in this country. It is no surprise to me that we have white supremacists in this country. This has been, as has been stated, since its inception. The suppression of that speech, I don't really know if that is the solution. I think it'll be a combination of the courts and Congress to determine when speech is protected and when speech is classified as hate speech or commercial speech and no longer carries the same protection. As it goes for tech, I do believe there is going to be, as a former regulator, I believe there is going to be a regulatory construct needed, not just to better regulate big tech and social media, but in terms of its instrumentalities to make certain that communities have full, unfettered access to broadband, as we should have full and unfettered access to healthcare. By the way, broadband has now become a critical portion of healthcare. So I think that we are now coming into an era where we will see tectonic changes in our regulatory and constitutional framework in order to address the various issues that have evolved in our society, some that have been here since its very beginning.
I'm glad you talked about that, the tectonic changes that we're seeing. When we return, we'll talk about the tectonic changes that we're seeing from members of Congress as it relates to impeaching the president yet again. It's second time, it's unprecedented, and what holds or what's in our future. That's next. As you know, the United States Senate and Congress are now looking at what they can do to stop this president from doing any more harm, particularly in the House side. They've already proposed an impeachment. This is the second impeachment. On Wednesday, we'll likely have some sort of vote on that. They will move this very swiftly. They're also seeking the 25th Amendment. Vice President Pence has to sign off on that. It's unlikely that they will do that, yet we could see a change. Dr. Avis, when we were at a different point, we're at an inflection point during 9/11, and we saw sweeping changes take place. And now we're about to see sweeping changes take place yet again because of domestic terrorism. What are your concerns, or what do you see happening with this entire impeachment process?
Well, first of all, I will just say, I hope we see sweeping changes. I'm not quite yet convinced that we will. And the reason why I say that is because the threat with regards to 9/11 was that came from a foreign entity and from people with brown skin. Now we're talking about homegrown whiteness. And this country has shown a great deal of leniency, as we saw in Living Color last week, when it comes to white terrorism, which, as I mentioned, has been a part of this nation since its very beginning. And so though I would hope that there would be some very strong action, and given the fact that we have a new administration that is coming in with, thank goodness, an entirely new Congress, including the Senate, that gives me hope that we will see change. But I have to tell you that, you know, we are within a country that has found itself to be very, very lenient when it comes to white terrorism writ large. Now, as it relates to this particular issue of impeachment, is absolutely needed. I mean, the Constitution does say that for high crimes and misdemeanors, there's a process in which you can get rid of a president. And I don't care if it's 1 day left or 1,000,000 days left. You cannot let traitorous activity by someone who has taken an oath to protect and defend this nation from all enemies, foreign and domestic, to stand. You cannot allow that to stand without some level of punishment. Obviously, there are two prongs to this process. There's the impeachment prong, and there is the removal prong, which the Senate has domain over. The Republicans still have domain over the Senate right now, unfortunately. So we don't expect anything to happen there. But you cannot just turn away your responsibility for making sure that this president is brought to task with regards to his incitement of an insurrection against the very nation for which he claims to be the leader of. It is absolutely unforgivable, and it needs to be punished. And he needs to go down in history uniquely as the only president ever to have impeached twice, because he at least deserves that distinction.
Thank you for that, Mark. On that note, Senators Ted Cruz and Hawley there's a chorus line developing saying they should be disbarred, as well as Rudy Giuliani, who spoke at the rally before everything unfolded, all the tyranny that took place that day. But he said, let's have trial by combat. Talk to me about the disbarment.
The bottom line is, following up on what Dr. Avis just said, it is inexcusable behavior on the part of sitting members of the United States Senate, a former United States attorney, Giuliani. It's unconscionable. And I hope that the efforts that have been expressed will go forward in terms of potential disbarment. It's interesting that Harvard Law School and Yale Law School are the respective alma maters of Hawley and Cruz. It's their student body, very progressive, that's calling most vociferously for their removal. But I do want to go back a little bit in terms of the process. The Constitution, the predicate to the Constitution, as we all know, is the Federalist Papers. So being the Constitution nerd that I am, I pulled those documents out this weekend and took a look at what the founders said about impeachment. And it was Alexander Hamilton, of course, who wrote most of the Federalist Papers. Federalist Paper number 65, 66, and 69 address impeachment. And the bottom line is that the founders believed that the American people were the ones who were the ultimate court of last resort in most instances, not in every instance. In this circumstance, yes, the president will probably be impeached in the House. That takes a simple majority vote. The Democrats have the majority. But the actual trial and potential conviction would take place in the United States Senate, it was just pointed out. And even if he's convicted, the only penalty per se is his removal from office. And guess what? He will have already been removed from office. There is an additional effort to try to prevent him from ever becoming president again or seeking public office going forward. I'd love to see that. But there are very limited things that can happen even through the impeachment process. And one of the things that can happen is the president can pardon himself. Future. He can say any federal crimes that I'm charged with by virtue of my role as president of the United States, I'm going to basically pardon myself from any criminal liability relative to those actions. He can do that. And even Speaker Pelosi acknowledged that last night.
Yeah, well, point well taken. But Timothy, he cannot pardon himself from state crimes. Right. The state of New York is waiting, and there are other states that may follow suit. We're coming back with more after this. Big corporations are pulling their sponsorship of these GOP members, as well as the president of the United States. He's going to be hurt really big when the PGA pulls its championship tournament from his golf club. So there are some repercussions coming his way, as well as those Republicans who have basically sidestepped the issue and stayed with him.
Well, many of the Fortune 500 who have said they're going to pull their money out of GOP donors, they're also, many of them said they're pulling out of political donations altogether. So some Democratic Party efforts are being affected. And this is the reactionary side of what is transpiring. After the lives of the United States Congress was threatened by these terrorists, there were still Republicans who placed their objections to the certification into the record. The only solution to this race war that began in this country in 1619 is the recognition and acceptance that it exists, number one. And for my former colleagues, many of whom friends of the Republican Party, to begin to eradicate the enabling of white nationalism and white supremacy that has been going on in the party for many, many years, going back to the Southern strategy when many of these folks' parents were Democrats and came over to the Republican Party. So I do believe that swift action should be taken. They appointed a Supreme Court justice in 8 days, and that we should not take this as a victory, but as a step towards our constant battle for justice. It's not going to end here.
Constant battle for justice is not going to end here. I have to go, but real quickly, all three of you, what's going to heal the soul of America?
You know, I really don't know, to be perfectly honest. You look at a contingent of citizens in the millions who have been completely brainwashed to one extent, with which they now believe a boatload of conspiracy theories and misinformation. But that brainwashing, to me, is effective because it's above a layer of hate that was pre-existing and that was utilized for decades, as was mentioned, as a political strategy. And so there needs to be truth, but also there needs to be rooting out of hate. And I understand that that's not something that will happen with everyone. It may just be that we have to move forward with the willing and figure out how we can get past the danger that those who are a threat to America present to this nation. And a lot of that means rooting out those hate entities and really trying to abolish them with the same level of aggression that we have. This country has a history of abolishing Black organizations and Black leaders that were merely looking to fight for freedom for people.
Mark?
Acknowledgement and atonement. I've said it all the way through, Kelly. America has to acknowledge its racist history, and it has to atone for it. Until that happens, nothing else is going to be fixed. We're going to constantly be battling over issues such as this for the foreseeable future until America acknowledges and atones.
Timothy.
Kelly, you are a profound vocalist, and another great vocalist from Pine Bluff, Arkansas, who's gone on to glory, once sang, that's Bobby Blue Bland, that you're going to have to hurt before you heal. And this healing process for this country is going to involve a lot of hurt, because we're going to have to uncover and go to the root causes of this bizarre notion of racism that we live with on a day-to-day basis. And I think every member of this society has to go back and evaluate their views towards people who are different for whatever reason. And that's when this nation will heal. But that is a hurting process. And it's going to require legislation. It's going to require court decisions, which will be very difficult with this conservative court. And it's going to require the real will of the people, because that is where it begins and ends.
I want to thank you all. Personally, I think it requires remorse, and then it requires repentance, and then it requires the faith to go through exactly what each of you have said, the painful process of healing. But out of that comes perseverance, out of that comes character. And the character of America is on the line. Thank you all. Dr. Ava Johnson-Weaver, attorneys Mark Harris and Timothy Allen Simon. We'll be back with more. We'll talk about law enforcement. What went wrong that day with security? That's next.